Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to a roundup of Friday practice for the US Grand Prix. Now coming up, I'll be going over the results of FP1 and FP2, covering some of the main talking points from those sessions and going over 3 news stories in the rundown. As is always the case for these types of videos, you can find timestamps in the description and as a pinned comment. But let's kick things off by having a look at the results from FP1 followed by FP2. Rain was the order of the day in Austin, but it was Lewis Hamilton who topped the first session 1.3 seconds quicker than teammate Valtteri Bottas. Max Verstappen wasn't a million miles away from the Finn in third, with his teammate Daniel Ricciardo half a second further back in fourth, but the Ferraris were only 5th and 6th, with Vettel 1.9 seconds off the pace and Raikkonen almost 2.5 seconds down. In general, we can't really read an awful lot into Friday practice, but we certainly can't with the weather the way it is. So really, these aren't representative times. Carlos Sainz was 7th for Renault, with Romain Grosjean just behind in 8th, and then it's the 2 Saubers of Charles Leclerc and Marcus Ericsson rounding out the top 10. Fernando Alonso was 11th for McLaren, with FP1 stand-in Lando Norris behind in 12th, not a million miles away from his teammate at all, 2 tenths off, so a really good session from the Brit. Pierre Gasly was 13th for Toro Rosso, but some bad news for them ahead of qualifying, but I'll get onto that in just a moment. Sergio Perez 14th for Force India, with Sergei Sorokin in 15th. And then it's Kevin Magnussen in 16th, Esteban Ocon in 17th, Nico Hülkenberg 18th, Lance Stroll down in 19th in his Williams, and Sean Gelael, the other FP1 stand-in, was down in 20th, a long way off the pace, but more importantly for him, some really good laps on the board. As for FP2, well, it was a very frustrating session. Not an awful lot happened for the first 45 minutes. Again, I'll talk about that in just a moment. But it was Lewis Hamilton who once again topped the session, a second clear of Pierre Gasly. However, what I will say on Gasly is that his time is probably a little bit skewed because he was the only one to go out on a fresh set of intermediates. Max Verstappen was once again 3rd for Red Bull, with Fernando Alonso up to 4th and Nico Hülkenberg in 5th. But still a long way off the pace of those front runners, as was Brendan Hartley in the 2nd Toro Rosso. He really did need to go out though, having missed the morning session. Marcus Ericsson was 7th, with Stoffel van Dorn, another one who missed the morning session, in 8th, Kimi Raikkonen 9th, and Sebastian Vettel down in 10th, 5.1 seconds off the pace, but again, these times mean absolutely nothing. Charles Leclerc was 11th for Sauber, with Lance Stroll in 12th, just ahead of the 2 Force Indias of Perez and Ocon. And Sergei Sorokin ended the session in 15th place for Williams, with Carlos Sainz, Daniel Ricciardo, Romain Grosjean, Kevin Magnussen and Valtteri Bottas all deciding not to go out and thus not setting a time. So the talking points then, and to be perfectly honest, most of them came in that first session. It was a wet start to FP1, but drivers did go out and set some early installation laps. But eventually they did go out and do some proper running, as you saw, despite the weather. But the track was only ever dry enough to run the intermediates. Now Ferrari have arrived in Austin with a brand new floor, and that's fitted to Kimi Raikkonen's car, so they did go out in that first session to get as much running done as possible and really give it a good shakedown. And although not as many laps as would be expected in the dry, it was still a decent number. I believe it was around 20. I'm not sure how relevant that data will be due to the conditions, but it is better than nothing, of course. Toro Rosso, they've got a new aero package including a new front wing, but it is only on Pierre Gasly's car, so his running in FP1 was also important. We did get a red flag in that first session after Charles Leclerc went for a spin at turn 9, and as he returned to the track he dragged a load of gravel with him, and the stewards decided to stop the session and give the track a good clean up. The session was restarted with 40 minutes left on the clock, and of course the running continued. However, when that red flag initially came out, the stewards felt as though Sebastian Vettel did not slow down enough, and so he was summoned to the stewards after the session to explain why. Now, in terms of penalty context, if you like, Daniel Ricciardo was found to have done the same in Australia and Esteban Ocon in Japan, and both of those drivers received a 3-place grid penalty for the race. For whatever reason, the stewards took until after FP2 to make their decision on the German, and came to the conclusion that the infringement warranted a 3-place grid drop for Vettel, and he also received 2 penalty points on his licence. It's a decision that hasn't gone down particularly well with some people, but in all fairness to the stewards, by the letter of the law and based on the decisions taken regarding Ricciardo and Ocon, you have to say it was the right decision. However, I do tend to agree with Toto Wolff and Christian Horner in that this rule needs to be at least looked at or discussed, as it does seem overly harsh. Yes, absolutely, 100% safety is paramount, but the hard line itself that they've put in place for 2018 just seems a little bit too excessive. But as I've already said, as it stands, those are the rules. and the decision is consistent with some of the previous penalties applied this season. It is also bad news for Toro Rosso, as Honda confirmed earlier on Friday that both cars will require brand new power units, and that means that Gasly and Hartley are both set to start from the back of the grid on Sunday. And if you were expecting to see Nicholas Latifi during FP1, he was due to run, of course, in place of Esteban Ocon, but Force India made the decision before the session to cancel that, and Latifi will get a run in Abu Dhabi instead. So as you saw, it was just Lando Norris and Sean Galeo in for FP1. As for the second practice session, well, rain hit literally just before the session started, and it took 45 minutes before Brendan Hartley and Stoffel Vandoorne took to the track. To be honest though, it wasn't that long after that a number of other drivers joined them, and with, I would say, around about 10 minutes to go, most of the other drivers went out on intermediates, but not all of them went out and not all of them set a time, as you saw earlier in the video. Okay, the running may not be representative, I mean it never really is on a Friday. And some might even argue that the data gathered would be fairly useless given that we're going to get a dry race on Sunday. But with rain forecasts for both FP3 and qualifying, those going out and getting laps in and trying to get to know the track in the wet could prove to be fairly important for some. But other than that, Red Bull had some garage karaoke and Lando Norris made Fernando Alonso a coffee. Yeah, one of those sessions. But let's move on and jump into the news rundown then, and kicking us off, Williams are apparently working on a plan to enable them to sign Esteban Ocon for next season. So according to Autosport, Williams are looking to raise enough money to allow them the freedom to choose a second driver purely on preference, without having to rely on a driver's sponsorship as they have this season. Of course, it was announced last week that George Russell will be filling one of the seats at the team, but that signing did not come with any form of commercial support from Mercedes, meaning that with the probable loss of Lance Stroll, and the fact that they will lose title sponsor Martini at the end of the year as well, there is a gaping hole in their finances, although it is believed that their short-term financial situation is secure. And Esteban Ocon himself added fuel to the fire by stating, quote, "There's still a second seat at Williams, there's still talks, so we'll see where that goes." He did also say that he would not be looking for a long-term deal, and added again, quote, "If Williams want me, it's fantastic news. If they don't, they don't." So there is hope for Ocon yet, but Sergei Sirotkin and Robert Kubica are both still firmly in contention, with the poll apparently making a fresh push to land some hefty sponsorship, and Sirotkin working on sorting out more of his own, so watch this space. McLaren have confirmed that they will not be running full-time in IndyCar in 2019. As has been widely reported, the team have held talks over the course of this year about the possibility of joining the series for next season. However, gearing up for this weekend's US Grand Prix, Zak Brown has now ruled out any chance of McLaren becoming a full-time entry next year. The McLaren boss said that they were simply not ready to enter yet, but that they, quote, "do have a desire to do it in the near future." Despite that decision though, he did add that the team were still looking at entering for the 2019 Indy 500, and says that it is definitely something the team are interested in. And apparently McLaren will make a decision on that at the end of the current F1 season. And finally for the rundown, Max Verstappen says that Renault's promise of being able to close the gap to Mercedes and Ferrari next season is, quote, "the same old song." Cyril Abiteboul revealed earlier this week that Renault would be bringing a new engine design to F1 for 2019 in a bid to cut the deficit to the top two teams. Renault initially planned to base their 2019 engine on their Spec C unit, but Abiteboul believes a new approach is required as the engine's current structure is causing too many limitations in terms of upgrades. But Max Verstappen, who will be using Honda power next season, of course, is not overly impressed by the French manufacturer's claims, stating that the plan to catch Mercedes and Ferrari was, quote, "the idea 4 years ago as well, and 3 years ago as well, and 2 years ago as well." The Dutchman also went on to say that he feels it's the same old story and is not something he's concerning himself with, as he is looking forward to the challenge that working with Honda presents next season. One thing is for sure, it's going to be very interesting to see how Renault and Honda shape up against each other next season, and it will certainly be a very interesting battle to keep an eye on. That is it then for this practice and news roundup then, and with reports saying we'll be getting a wet qualifying session, have your weekend predictions changed? Who do you think will take pole position, and who are you expecting to grab victory on Sunday? Let me know your thoughts on those, and of course any of the news stories featured in the comment section down below. Now, I will be back with Jonty and Chainbear for the post-race livestream, with that getting underway tomorrow at 10 PM UK time. But if there is any more content coming in the meantime, I will let you know. If you are wondering about the content scheduling for this weekend, by the way, I did post a schedule in the community tab here on YouTube earlier this week. Don't forget you can follow me on social media. Links to Twitter, Instagram, Facebook and to Discord are all in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean, this has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.